Lavish display of friendship, handshakes, hugs, all of that right there in the South Lawns of the White House. An extremely lavish display of friendship that we just saw at the White House with US President Joe Biden rolling out that red carpet for India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We also had marching bands, a multi-gun salute, all of that for the honor of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and both the leaders spoke of the India-US friendship. Just to give you a little gist of what both the leaders talked about, the ceremony began with the American President Joe Biden talking about how India and the US is a defining partnership of the 21st century and how the two nations need to come together and work towards resolving the common challenges that the world faces. He also talked about how he referred to the constitutions of both the countries and how they're bound by the same words, the three words, we the people, that are both existing in the Indian as well as the American Constitution. He also talked about how, whether it's the climate change impact around the world or the food and fuel shortage that has emerged out of the Russia-Ukraine conflict or other challenges that the world is witnessing, how India and the United States need to come together. He also talked about critical technology, something that is extremely important to be shared, to be cooperated under between the two nations. And he talked about, of course, the very, very important element in the India-US partnership, that is the Indian diaspora, and how the Indian diaspora members are a bridge between the two nations. And of course, we saw huge crowds gathered at the South Lawns. The first time in an unprecedented move by the White House, they were invited into the South Lawns to welcome Prime Minister Modi. Of course, Prime Minister Modi in turn, there you can see visuals of the two leaders along with the First Lady Jill Biden waving at the Indian diaspora and the media present there. Remember, this is of the first time that the Indian American community has been welcomed into the South Lawns of the White House, really reflecting the kind of importance that this about 4 million strong member community holds in the US. They might be, holding just 1% of the American population, but they hold an extremely important strategic importance in the relationship between the two countries.
Yes, so Prime Minister Narendra Modi kicking off the third day of his state visit to the United States by attending this ceremonial guard of honor in front of the White House, and there we saw the important words reiterated by both the leaders, US President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, that India-United States relationship is the most defining of the 21st century. Both countries have shared democratic values, and their constitutions also reflect the same words, the beginning words, we the people, and both countries need to work together for global good. And Joe Biden also said that both countries are committed to a free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific, and Joe Biden further said that when future generations will look back in time, they will say that Quad bent the arc of history for global good, and these words were reiterated, global good, in the address of the Prime Minister as well. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi thanking his hosts, Joe Biden and Jill Biden, and offering gratitude to them for hosting him. He in fact attributed this honor to the 140 crore Indians and 4 million strong Indian diaspora. So we continue to have Dr. Harinder Sekho with us, our guests, and we are also joined by Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia. Dr. Harinder Sekho, coming to you first. Global good, the sentiment that echoed in the addresses of both US President Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The last words that Prime Minister Narendra Modi uttered were also Jai Hind and God bless America. So shared values of democracy echoing in both the addresses. How would you sum up both these addresses?
Cooperated without any tensions as such, even if there have been certain hiccups in the relationship, say during in the strategic, or maybe sometimes our interests do not align when it comes to the economic relationship or the H1B, which are moving forward now. But when it came, the first time India really lent its weight globally was during the tsunami in 2004. And that is when India really came to the forefront as somebody who could be relied on as a partner when there's a global emergency. And from there, India has only looked up. As we witnessed more recently during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and India was at the forefront of rushing supplies to the underdeveloped countries, to South Asian nations, to Southeast Asia, to the African countries. So we really took the lead. Then when it comes to any disasters and relief operations, so and then also we collaborate with the United States on climate change, on mitigating the the side effects of development and industrialization. So I think there's a whole lot of future in the non-traditional security aspect, where India and the United States have found common good, a common ground. Besides that, we should never undermine the strategic aspect of the relationship. And I think it's good that for the first time we notice that the economic relationship is being viewed more strategically. Rather than nitpicking on smaller issues, this roadmap for technical and technological cooperation, I think this is where the interests of the two nations align. We have tremendous scope in collaborating on healthcare, besides technology, and what we have talked about earlier, the ISET and the Indes X, which have been launched. These are all a step in the right direction. So I think the future is very good, but we need to make sure that there is no room for complacency. We need to build upon this momentum. Thank you.
Okay, Ambassador Bhatia, coming to you, Dr. Sekhon made a very important point that we shouldn't be nitpicking on the smaller issues that exist between India and the United States. And, observers and experts like yourself have also said that perhaps US and India are not natural allies, but they have left behind the hesitations of the past, just as Prime Minister Modi previously said in his address in the US during his last visit. With the kind of addresses that we saw right now by President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Modi, how much of the hesitations of the past have we really left behind, and where do we see this partnership heading, considering the fact that both have really talked about how the relationship has strengthened, and President Joe Biden also called it the defining partnership of the 21st century?
Provokes some fresh thinking, and of course we shouldn't do it too early, because we should wait for the final outcome of the visit. But I think the way the two leaders have just presented themselves at the welcome ceremony, it becomes very clear that there is a very strong convergence of perspectives between the two of them. So when it comes to the question of hesitations of the past or history, relationship between two states is a kind of an evolving process. It is something that is a continuation. And as you were asking the question, my mind was going back to 1998.
Yeah.
After our nuclear tests, it was the same country, the US.
Yes.
Which was very angry, and which was really taking the relationship into a very strained phase relationship. And today, just about 25 years later, we saw the spirit of this relationship showcased and reflected by an amazing ceremony at the White House. So I think the experts and the historians and the analysts would always look at two or even more aspects of the relationship. But let us be very clear, today it's a very good day for India-US relations, and I would like, with your permission, to highlight a couple of points which the leaders made. I think we should try to understand what President Biden said very clearly. I think his reference to the role of people, and in that context highlighting the fact that his own vice president, the vice president of US, with a person of Indian origin, and the struggles of her mother and her own rise to the second highest spot in the country's polity. That is something we should not at all ignore or forget. Second, he also pointed out that he had the chance to welcome Mr. Modi first as the Vice President many years back, and now as President. I think probably there is no other leader who has earned this privilege. So on the other hand, Prime Minister Modi again made a very touching, striking point when he said that he has been to the US the first time when he came many years back, 30 years back I think. He looked at the White House from the outside.
Yeah.
And this story that the same White House then he has been receiving him for many times, but it was the first time occasion now when the gates were open to accept such a large number of Indians, to watch the welcome ceremony and to part of the people who are welcoming the Indian Prime Minister. So this people-oriented dimension of the relationship is very important. This was reflected, as you said yourself, the fact that both the leaders reiterated the first three words of the Constitution, US and India. So overall, I think they also finally, gave you a bit of a glimpse of the agenda, the list of items that they're going to discuss inside the White House. So all in all, it's a very good beginning, and I really want to thank you and Doordarshan International for showing the ceremony so beautifully. I almost felt that I was back at the White House South Lawn, watching it there in Washington rather than from my home in Noida.
Yeah. And of course, we all of us here, Ambassador Bhatia, also got the goosebumps when the national anthem was playing at the White House. But we're told that you have to leave, Ambassador Bhatia. Thank you very much. We'll let you go here. Thank you so much and for being patient and for joining us on this special broadcast on DD India on the Prime Minister's
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Special visit. Namaskar, sir. All right, let's go across to Dr. Sekhon. Yes, she continues to be with us. Dr. Sekhon, Ambassador Bhatia talked about how the two leaders talked to the Indian diaspora. This, of course, is the first time that the Indian American community has been invited to the South Lawns at the White House.
And in huge numbers.
Yes, absolutely, in huge numbers. And there are over 4 million strong community there. President Biden called them the bridge between the two nations. Help us understand how strategically they're important to not just India but the United States as well.
The Indian American community has emerged, as back as 2004.
Yeah.
There was a survey where the Indian American community emerged as the most highly educated, the highest tax-paying community in the United States. Their numbers may be small, comprising just about a little over 1% of the total American population, but they have made significant contributions to the Silicon Valley. So it's not just in computers and IT, but now you find that the Indian American community is very active in Congress. A large number of them occupy important places in the administration, and their numbers have been going up right from the time of George W. Bush. So over the last 20 years, we've seen that their numbers have been rising. You have an Indian American Vice President of the United States of America, and a woman at that. So I think the Indian American community cannot be wished away. Trump, when Prime Minister Modi was there the last time, and they had that big walk around the stadium in Houston, it was the Indian American community which turned out in large numbers, and they also play a very important role in US politics. They are a very important vote bank in US politics. They fund the elections, they drive the US economy to a great extent, and also, as I mentioned, they're the highest tax paying amongst all the native communities in the United States. So I think, and highly educated as that, at that. Then their contribution not just to Silicon Valley, to the US healthcare system, and now in large numbers as the STEM teachers who are going to American schools. So the Indian American community has emerged as a very formidable force in within the United States, and I think their importance is only increasing. Also, the fact that Biden cannot be oblivious of the fact that the U.S. also goes into elections. So maybe he's looking at that, but I think there is a great genuine connect. And I'd also like to mention one thing about the Indian community. The people-to-people connect between India and the United States remained strong even during the Cold War, when our two countries were on the opposite end of the spectrum ideologically, politically, strategically, and we were on the wrong side of the Cold War. So I think the Indian community has made significant contributions to the American way of life. They've earned a place for themselves in the United States.
Dr. Harinder, yes, and in some time from now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will have the distinction of being the Indian Prime Minister to have addressed the US Congress twice. Now, what does this say about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership and the strength of the India-US relations?
There's no doubt about the leadership style of Prime Minister Modi. He has led from the front. He has been following a very vigorous foreign policy right from the beginning, right from the time he made his first visit to the United States in September 2014. Not just with the United States, but I think he has shown tremendous energy in raising India's profile globally. So, whether it's, revamping our Look East policy, reaching out to the smaller nations like Fiji, the Maldives and all, closer home. Even in Europe, I think Europe is looking towards India more seriously now. And the United States, of course, has always been a very important relationship for India, and this transformation began about 20 years back, considering that in 1998 we were under sanctions after having done the nuclear test. So I think there has been an exponential increase in US-India relations, which has built up to the present momentum. But there's definitely been a new energy which has come into this relationship in the last, I would say, 6 or 7 years. There may have been a little bit of diffidence in 2014, but that has given way to the warmth and the camaraderie which you see today.
Okay. So, yeah. All right. Dr. Saikhon, also let me welcome our guest, Ambassador Neelam Deo, co-founder of the Gateway House. Ambassador Deo, welcome to this special broadcast on DD India on the Prime Minister's visit to the United States. We just heard the two leaders a while back talk about how the India-US relationship has strengthened over the past few years. And one of the key elements in this relationship has been trade. In fact, the bilateral trade has been increasing over decades now. And in 2021-22, America emerged as the largest trading partner of India. And in fact, if I talk about the FDI flow, India received the highest ever FDI from the US, amounting to about $81.72 billion. So that has been really, the state of the bilateral trade and the increasing sectors, number of sectors in which the two countries are cooperating. Where do you see this economic relationship heading, and in which newer sectors can the two nations cooperate?
So I think it's important to recognize that this is fairly balanced trade. India has a small advantage, but a big part of it is services, a big part of it is based on technology. And what will happen as a result of the present agreements being concluded in this visit is that technology is receiving the most focus. Defense technologies, semiconductors, all of the focus, all the agreements, space agreement, all of them are focused on technology, and that will give a big boost to trade between the two countries, because in any case, our most important, most vibrant exchanges are high-tech, they are based on technology, they have been based on information technology so far, but now other, including manufacturers, where technology matters a great deal, will go up quite rapidly. at the same time, defense is a very high value item.
Yeah.
And the fact that we are going in for collaborating in producing the jet engines with GE, or the armed drones that we are buying, and the Micron agreement is very important. Those will enable a trade to jump because all of the products are high value. We will buy a lot of defense items from the United States, assuming that processes on both sides go smoothly, because the US also has a complicated process for export and sharing of high tech, and we have complicated processes, and we have to have the capacity to receive and absorb this high technology. But I think it will give a big impetus to trade, but most importantly, it will be a big impetus to further exchanges in the highest technologies.
All right, Ambassador Neelam and Dr. Harendra, let's talk a little bit now about the China factor. Well, two things have happened in the recent past. So yesterday, President Joe Biden called Chinese President Xi Jinping a dictator, and the tensions after the visit of Antony Blinken to China, I mean, no major breakthrough was achieved. Now, a day later, we see this Indian Prime Minister receiving the ceremonial guard of honor, attending the Yoga Day celebrations in a historic way again. So what is the message being sent here to China, and of course to other emerging global powers in the world? Dr. Seko, you please answer first.
Thank you. I think we should not look at it as something that it's versus China or something. We should look at it purely from the US-India relationship. And I think what we did with the United States, it has raised our global profile. And I think the transformative movement there came during the signing of the nuclear deal. As I mentioned earlier, 1998, we were under sanctions. And then when the United States did the heavy lifting for us and facilitated, that the NSG, all those NSG waivers, etc., I think that was really the moment for India to take off. And that is what has taken us to where we have emerged today, a confident, progressive nation, which has a very vibrant, young corporate sector,
yes,
which is making big strides, and that is where I think there are synergies between India and the United States. So I think the China factor is important, and there are certain concerns over there between, there have been concerns in the past, because there was a feeling that the United States would like us to focus more on the Indo-Pacific, which again is a very important region for India, because we have our supply chains and our supplies and raw materials coming from that part of the world. But our real core interests lie on the land border, which we share with China. We have cross-border trade, we have a great deal of trade with China, which of course is not to our benefit because the deficit goes against us. But all the same, China, we need to resolve our issues on the border. So how we manage this is important, and I think there was some speculation, and there were these articles which have been in the media in the last 1 week or so, whether India would come to the US, to the assistance of the United States if there was a war with Taiwan. I think the Americans, the US administration realizes that India is not going to get involved in any foreign wars. We withstood US pressure during, there was pressure that we should send some peacekeeping soldiers and all to Iraq, but we withstood that pressure. And despite that, despite the fact we held our ground, the United States has grown closer, has recognized India's growing importance. And I think the important aspect is that both of us now are of the opinion that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. The two democracies, we are intertwined economically. We both need to go away from China. And yes, the Chinese angle, I think Xi Jinping, China has vetoed this move to designate the Pakistan terrorist as a global terrorist. So I think China is closely watching what is happening between India and the United States. But economically, I think there are still a lot of interlinkages. We cannot break the economic link with China, neither can the United States. So we have to really look for alternatives and proper alternatives to doing more together economically between India and the United States.
All right. Ambassador Neelam, what is your view? Do you think China factor may have induced the United States to agree to this deal of the GE and the HAL to produce fighter jet engines in India for the Indian Air Force? How do you see this China factor at play here?
So, the China factor is really quite important. And even in this brief address that President Biden made to welcome our Prime Minister a few minutes ago, he spoke about the Quad. Now, the Quad is not a military agreement, it is not a military alliance, but it is a strategic agreement, and it is a grouping that is aiming to work together on many things in which China is a factor. So I do think that, in fact, a few years ago, when the Quad got revived and got a higher profile, the joke used to be that the father of the Quad is China. And there's no question that the purpose of the Quad, even if it's not military, is to deal with China in different ways. So I think China is a very important factor, but both countries recognize that the best way to deal with a situation like this is to work together for more and more countries which have democratic frameworks, even though we have different histories, coming together and working on lots of issues to reduce our dependence on China. So the Micron deal is very important to reduce dependence on, say, Taiwan or South Korea or other countries, but where China plays an important role because of how it threatens Taiwan. These deals, the GE deal is important because the United States would like to see India as a strong military power in its own right, so that we can deal better in case and when the Chinese threaten us on our own border. So China is a big factor in everything that is happening today. It's the second largest economy in the world. It is the biggest trading partner of most countries, including all, even in the United States. If you leave out Canada and Mexico, it is their biggest trading partner. So China is a factor.
Okay, Ambassador Deo, please hold your thought there. I'll come back to you. For the viewers, let me also tell you that as we speak, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the American President Joe Biden are holding bilateral talks at the Oval Office. We'll play out those visuals in a short while from now, and that crucial bilateral meeting is currently underway at the White House. Kate is back with us. She's joining us from Washington, D.C., and she's been tracking the Prime Minister's visit there for us. Kate, we just saw the two leaders, addressing the Indian diaspora that was gathered there. We also saw a very grand, lavish display of friendship and warmth as the US President rolled out that big red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister with that grand ceremonial welcome that he was given. First of all, help us understand what all happened there.
Yeah, this is really significant. This doesn't happen very often. Certainly under President Biden's administration, Mr. Modi is only the third world leader to receive a state visit, and this one has been, as you note, particularly grand. You've had bands, marching bands, you've had the red carpet, literal red carpet, and you saw on those pictures many members of the Indian American diaspora, the Indian diaspora, there to greet Mr. Modi and Mr. Biden. Often at these things it is a much more calm affair. The members of the country's diaspora aren't always invited, yet this was a real statement visually of how many Indian Americans there are in the US and how popular Mr. Modi is with them. It's with the backdrop of the White House and all that pomp and ceremony, the optics were really striking. It shows just how much effort and priority the Biden administration is putting into this relationship with India. There was a very warm relationship, it seemed, between the two leaders, a hug and a handshake, and very, very warm words between them. So in terms of the impression that it gives to the Indian community, the American community, and to the rest of the world, I'm thinking particularly of China and Russia, it really does show the image that they were trying to express is this deep, strong relationship that they both say is only going to get more intense.
Yes. And just the fact that in diplomacy, Kate, every little bit, whether it's your words or your body language, everything matters, and just the fact that the two leaders spoke in their own native languages, but they had translators translating that for the Indian diaspora members that had gathered there, also holds a lot of significance when it comes to both the nations making an effort to reach out to that very, very important element in that partnership, that of the Indian diaspora.
Absolutely. Mr. Biden and the White House have made it clear that they intend to be very respectful of Mr. Modi and Indian culture. There has been obviously both languages taken. The state dinner tonight will be vegetarian because Mr. Modi, of course, is a vegetarian. There will be tables draped in green with saffron-coloured flowers to represent the Indian flag. There will be lotus blooms throughout. All these touches
and millets also are part of that dinner,
trying to show that they respect India and welcome them.
Yes. So, Kate, important words there said by US President Joe Biden when he said that India and the United States should lead the world together considering the changing geopolitical scenario. So, you also mentioned of China and Russia. Do you think India and the US should lead the world together? When US President Joe Biden says these words from the lawns at the White House, a message is going out to the other players in these changing geopolitical situations?
Absolutely, this is no accident that this was such an impressive show of the relationship between the two countries, and such a warm and close one. It is, as you say, a message to both nations, but also really a big sign to the Chinese and the Russians that these two huge players on the world stage, India, the most populous country and an emerging world power, that's how the White House has described them. The US is keen for the rest of the world, certainly its adversaries, to see that the US and India are close and working together on this, and they have the same priorities, not in every area, but when it comes to maintaining their democracies in the face of adversaries from across the world, they are in lockstep with each other, and that they intend to make that relationship even deeper over the coming months and years. They see it, certainly the White House telling us that they see this relationship as something that they want to develop over the coming decades, because they see India as a really important partner, just not now, but in the future.
That's right, and in fact, America as well as India have made it clear that they want to dehyphenate this relationship from China, that it is not just solely because of the China factor, but also, individually, separately, that the two nations share the kind of relationship, the kind of friendship that they have shared over the decades, and now that is, of course, getting strengthened. Dr. Sekhon, I'll come to you on a very important issue and concern that President Joe Biden talked about, that of critical technologies. And the kind of time that we are living in, the Industry 4.0 revolution coming in, and all sorts of Internet of Things and artificial intelligence coming in, that clubbed with the fact that cyber technologies are being also misused, whether it is during a political narrative or a conflict between two nations, it is being misused. Now, India and US have the India-US Cyber Framework that they signed in 2016 and the India-US Cyber Dialogue that was held back in September 2022. So there are arrangements in place between the two nations, but how far can they take this relationship and this partnership on cyber security, and how can the two nations really benefit from each other?
The critical technologies is something which has emerged recently. I think the background should be seen in the DTTI of 2012-2013 period, when India and the United States decided that they needed to have more in-depth technological collaboration between the two countries. But in the cyber domain, I think the realization, and we've been trying to collaborate with the United States in cybersecurity matters maybe almost for 20 years now. And there have been the next steps in strategic partnership is where it all started in 2003, 2004, when there was this awareness that we needed to do something in cybersecurity. But at that time, I think India probably, we had our technical experts in the United States, but we were taking in more from the United States. But now I think given the sheer numbers and India.
I visited Mumbai as Vice President.
Dr. Sekhon, hold your thought please. We will get back to you. We're getting shots of the bilateral meeting.
Small steps at a time.
10 साल पहले एक रिपोर्ट में दिया गया था मुंबई में जो मैंने कहा कि भारत और अमेरिका के लिए कितना जरूरी है कि एक एक कदम करके हम भागीदारी को आगे बढ़ाते जाएं.
Over that past 10 years, those small steps have transformed into large progress.
और समय के साथ साथ वो जो छोटे-छोटे कदम हमने उठाए हैं बहुत बड़ी प्रगति का रूप ले चुके हैं.
And today, the partnership between our countries is stronger than it's ever been.
और आज हम दोनों देशों के बीच में जो भागीदारी है पहले से कहीं अधिक मजबूत है.
We're seeing our major defense partnership now a pillar of Indo-Pacific peace and security structure.
और जब देख रहे हैं अपने स्पीच में शांति के लिए मोदी और अपने डिफेंस के लिए.
We've seen our economic ties and efforts to promote inclusive economic growth for our people and, quite frankly, people all around the world.
और सिर्फ अपने लोगों और समस्त के लोगों को बीच में देख रहे हैं कि समावेशी और आर्थिक विकास के प्रति हमारे आर्थिक संबंध में आगे भी गहराई और प्रगाढ़ता को आगे बढ़ाकर दिखा रहे हैं.
And we see in our growing cooperation on a whole range of issues: space, emerging technologies, clean energy, global infrastructure.
और इसे हम देखते हैं बहुत से अन्य मुद्दों पर जैसे कि हमारे सहयोग के रूप में अंतरिक्ष से लेकर के उभरती हुई टेक्नोलॉजी प्रौद्योगिकी में साफ ऊर्जा तक और साथ ही हमें बुनियादी ढांचे में.
I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for your decision to hosting the G20 this year, focusing the world on the challenges that matter not just to you and I, but to all of us.
और मैं प्रधानमंत्री जी मैं आपका बहुत आभार व्यक्त करना चाहता हूँ कि आपने G20 के इस वर्ष जो आपने नेतृत्व किया है और विश्व का ध्यान उन चुनौतियों की तरफ केंद्रित किया है जो कि हम सबके लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है.
I look forward to discussing how we can strengthen our partnership and build a future together worthy of both our peoples, one grounded on democracy, human rights, freedom, and rule of law.
आज मैं आपके साथ चर्चा करने के लिए बात देख रहा हूँ कि जिस तरह से हम आपकी और अपनी सहभागिता को और मजबूत कर सकते हैं और एक साथ मिलकर एक ऐसा भविष्य तैयार करें जो हमारे लोगों के लिए और अधिक बेहतर हो. एक ऐसा भविष्य जो लोकतंत्र, मानवाधिकारों, स्वतंत्रता और नियमों पर आधारित हो.
So welcome again, Mr. Prime Minister. We have a big agenda. We continue to build our progress. Again, step by step. Continue to build.
हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी एक बार फिर से आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है और मुझे हमारे सामने बहुत बड़ी कार्यसूची है. समय पर इस पर काम करना है, अपनी प्रगति के मार्ग को बढ़ाते जाना है, एक एक कदम उठाकर. धन्यवाद.
राष्ट्रपति जी, मैं आपका हृदय से बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ और डॉक्टर चीफ बाइडेन का हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ जिस प्रकार से आपने गर्म घोषित मेरा और हमारे डेलीगेशन का स्वागत किया. और विशेष रूप से मैं आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ आज आपने व्हाइट हाउस के बाद भारतीय समुदाय की जो वोट दी और हजारों की तादाद में भारतीय समुदाय अमेरिका भारत की भावी रणनीति के साक्षी बनने के लिए आज हमारे बीच मौजूद थे।
Your Excellency President Biden, I once again express my heartfelt gratitude to you and to Dr. Jill Biden for the hospitality and the respect that you have shown to me and my delegation. And more importantly, because you opened the doors of the White House today for the Indian American people, and they were there in thousands to witness the future of our strategic partnership.
एक्सीलेंट, आप हमेशा भारत के बहुत अच्छे शुभचिंतक हैं और जब भी आपको जहां भी अवसर मिला है आपने हमेशा भारत और अमेरिका के संबंधों के महत्व को बहुत बड़ा बल दिया है, बहुत बड़ी ताकत दी है। और मुझे याद है कि 8 साल पहले यूएस इंडिया बिजनेस काउंसिल को संबोधित करते हुए आपने बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात कही थी और आपने कहा था आवर गोल इज टू बिकम इंडिया बेस्ट बैंक। ये आपके शब्द आज भी गूंज रहे हैं। भारत के प्रति आपकी यही व्यक्तिगत प्रतिबद्धता हमें अनेक बोल्ड और महत्वाकांक्षी कदम उठाने के लिए प्रेरित कर रही है। आज भारत अमेरिका स्पेस की ऊंचाइयों से समुद्र की गहराइयों तक, एंशियंट कल्चर से लेकर के आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस तक हर क्षेत्र में कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर चल रहे हैं।
Your Excellency, you've always been India's friend and well-wisher for a very long time. And whenever you have got an opportunity, you've always given force and strength to our bilateral relations. Excellency, 8 years ago, while addressing the US-India Business Council, you had said, our goal is to become India's best friend. And it is this personal commitment of yours towards India that is inspiring us to take many bold and ambitious initiatives. Today, India and the US are working shoulder to shoulder in every field, from the depths of the oceans to the heights of the skies, from ancient culture to artificial intelligence.
डिप्लोमेटिक दृष्टि से जब किन्हीं दो देशों के बीच संबंधों की बात की जाती है तो अक्सर औपचारिक जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट, वर्किंग ग्रुप्स और एमओयू उसी के दायरे में आमतौर पर बातचीत होती है। इसका अपना महत्व है ही, लेकिन भारत और अमेरिका के रिश्तों का असली इंजन हमारे मजबूत पीपल टू पीपल संबंध है। और इस इंजन की एक जोरदार दहाड़ हमने अभी बाहर व्हाइट हाउस के लोन पर भी सुनी है।
Excellency, whenever there is talk of relations between any two countries from a diplomatic point of view, people often talk about some common joint statements, working groups, MOUs. All these definitely have their own importance, but the real engine of the Indian-US relationship is our strong people-to-people ties, and we just heard a spirited roar of that engine out on the White House grounds.
एक्सेलेंसी, जैसा आपने कहा, मैं उसे फिर से दोहराना चाहूंगा। आज की तेजी से बदल रही वैश्विक स्थिति में सभी की नजर विश्व के सबसे दो बड़े लोकतांत्रिक देशों पर है, भारत और अमेरिका पर है। मेरा मानना है कि हमारी स्ट्रेटेजिक सर्जन मानव जाति के कल्याण के लिए, वैश्विक शांति और स्थिरता के लिए, लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों में विश्वास रखने वाली सभी ताकतों के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है और पहले से कहीं ज्यादा महत्वपूर्ण है। मुझे विश्वास है कि हम मिलकर पूरे विश्व के सामर्थ्य को बढ़ाने में अवश्य सफल होंगे।
Your Excellency, as you said, and I would like to reiterate that, in today's rapidly changing global situation, all eyes are on the two largest democracies of the world, India and America. I believe that our strategic partnership is important for the welfare of the humankind, global peace and stability, and for all countries believing in democratic values. And this is important than ever before. I am confident that working together we will be successful in enhancing the strengths of the whole world.
आज हमारी बातचीत में हम ऐसे ही कई मुद्दों पर बात करेंगे और अपने स्ट्रेटेजिक संबंधों को नए आयाम से जोड़ेंगे। मैं एक बार फिर आपको आपकी मित्रता के लिए हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ।
We will talk about many such issues today. We will add new dimensions to our strategic partnership. I once again express my heartfelt gratitude to you for your friendship. Thank you, Mr. President.
So those were the opening statements ahead of the bilateral by both US President Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Indian Prime Minister again thanking the US President Joe Biden for hosting him. He says that he reiterated his words when Prime Minister Biden in the past said that our goal is to be India's best friend. And of course the collaboration sectors Biden said are in space, cleaner cleaner energy and critical technologies. So we're running short of time. We'll go back to our guests and take up their summing up, closing thoughts on these opening statements of the bilateral. Dr. Hirendo, please go first.
I think I'll just complete what you were asking me to talk about cybersecurity cooperation.
Ma'am, we are running short of time. Please give us your summing up thoughts now on this bilateral statements, opening statements, and of course overall the depth of India-US relations.
I think it's a very wide-ranging agenda which the two leaders have set out, and I think the working groups are going to come across some critical breakthroughs. And as you can see, it is the strategic economic partnership mainly focused on defense. I think the future is very promising, and I think it's a tremendous platform from which to build on and take this relationship to the.
All right, Ambassador Deo, quickly 30 seconds, your closing comments on this.
Well, I think the signal that is being given in the opening remarks by both the American President and the Indian Prime Minister is to also their own bureaucracies. We have a big agenda ahead of us. Work on this. There should be no slacking off. And I think that's really important, because often in the past we have lost possible achievements because the bureaucracies didn't move fast enough. I think this is a very strong message to both the bureaucracies as well as, of course, to any other country that is looking at this visit.
Okay. All right, Ambassador Neelam Deo, Dr. Harinder Sekhon and Kate Fisher from Washington, D.C. Thank you, ladies, for joining us on this very special broadcast on DD India. This evening on the Prime Minister's historic state visit to the United States, that bilateral meeting is underway as we speak, and on DD India, we will continue to get you the minute-to-minute details and analysis of the Prime Minister's visit to the United States. But right now we are wrapping up this special broadcast. Up next is Newsnight special broadcast with Munmun Bhattacharya. Stay tuned. Thank you very much for joining us right now. Namaskar.
Namaskar.